Welcome to the first Onshape tutorial for modelling a resin mood lamp. This is actually a physical project that we did with the BryPrep students when they came up to Bryanston School, and I thought it would be quite nice just to have a go at modelling it in Onshape as an introduction to the CAD software. This video assumes that you've already gone through and set up your Onshape account, which is free for educational use. Follow the previous tutorial in the playlist to see how to do that. So hopefully you've loaded up the software, which is browser based. You can, as I've said before, you can do that on a Mac or a PC. I tend to use it in Chrome, but you can use whatever web browser you would like to use. I've gone into the software and I'm now left with this blank screen really because I've not created anything on this account before. So you should be facing something very similar. So let's get started. So I'm going to left click on create, and then I'm going to left click on folder, and I'm going to create a folder for putting my project in, and I'm just going to call it Resin Mood Lamp, and then click on create. So you can see that's now created a folder, and if I go into that folder, it's empty. There are no documents there. So let's create a document for that. So left click on create, left click on document, and I'm going to call it Resin Lamp Base Parts, and then click on create. So that will now take me into the modeling area. You'll see that the name of this document is up here. You can see I've got a modeling area in the middle. I've actually got what are called 3 different work planes. Now the work planes you can think of as being pieces of paper or pieces of glass, if you like, because you can see through them that you can draw on. So they're flat surfaces for drawing on. We have a front one, and as I hover over it, you can see that it highlights the edges in orange. A right one, and again, as I hover over it, it highlights the edges in orange. And a top one. And every time you create a new model in Onshape, it starts with these 3 default work planes. So if you like, 3 pieces of paper that you can draw a sketch on. Once you've created a sketch, you can apply a feature to that sketch to turn it into 3D. Now, if that sounds a little bit confusing, I'll show you how to do that in a moment. You'll see across the top here, we've got lots of different tools, and these are context sensitive, so they will change depending on what we're doing. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a sketch on the top work plane. So I'm just going to hover the mouse over the edge of the top work plane, so it highlights it, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to left click on new sketch. So you'll now see up over on the top left of the area, I've got sketch number 1. This is the first sketch that I've created, and everything that I draw now will be part of sketch number 1. And hopefully you've also seen that the context sensitive tools have changed. I've now got lots of sketching tools with just a couple of feature tools highlighted over here. Now it's always easiest, I find, if I'm looking flat onto the sketch plane that I'm working with, the work plane that I'm working with. And I can do that in a couple of ways. I can right click in space, and I can select view normal to sketch plane. So if I left click on that, you'll see that the modeling view turns around, and I'm now looking down on that top work plane so that I can create a sketch. The other way of doing that is to use the N key for normal to. So I can press N on the keyboard, and that will do that as well. So if I just hold the right mouse button down and just spin my view at a jaunty angle, if I then press the N key on the keyboard, you'll see that that spins round, and I'm looking flat down onto the work plane. And that's what I tend to use. I tend to use the keyboard shortcut. So I'm looking flat down on here. Now I'm going to create something. So I've got a series of sketch tools. Now it's important to remember, I'm using this on quite a big monitor. If you've got a smaller monitor, you may find that some of the tools are buried under other tools. So if I come over here, you can see there's a little arrow next to this tool. Don't worry about what the tool does at the moment. But if I left click on the arrow, there are other options underneath. Likewise over here for the patterns and for files and inserting images and things there. Okay, don't worry too much about those at the moment, but if you are on a smaller screen, you might find that you have to look under different options to see more of your choices. Also, most of the drawing tools have several different options as well. So we're going to start off with a rectangle, but we're not going to use the corner rectangle, which is illustrated here. If I hover over it, it tells me what the tool is. We're going to use the center rectangle. So I'm going to left click on the little arrow, come down to the center point rectangle, and left click on there. Now If I just go back to the 3D view, you can see that we've got our 3 work planes, our front, our top and our right, and we've got this dot in the middle. This dot is the origin. It's where those 3 work planes intersect, and it's actually, when you're modelling, a really important thing to take account of, because it can help you. And you'll see as we go through these tutorials why I've elected to start with a center point rectangle and to start it on the origin. So I'm just going to press the N key again, just so that we're looking down on top of that top work plane. I've got the center rectangle tool selected, and I'm just going to left click on the origin. You can see that it highlights in orange, so I'm going to left click to place the center of the rectangle, and I'm just going to drag out a little ways and left click again. So I've got something that's approximately a square. So I've drawn the shape. What I now need to do is to dimension that shape. I want to give it a particular size. I'm going to use the dimension tool, so this double-headed arrow here, the dimension tool, and I'm going to left click on the top line and then come up and place where I want the dimension to be in my modeling area. Now, one thing to be aware of, okay, I tend to like symmetry, and I tend to want to place my dimension in the middle. But if I try and place the dimension there, you can see that the cursor has selected the edge of the other work plane, and because it's gone orange. And if I were to click, it would then be dimensioning that line to the edge of the work plane, and it will be a 90-degree angle. So I'm just going to click off center to place the dimension. And I want that to be 60 millimeters, so I'm going to type in 60 on the keyboard and hit enter. Now I also want the size to be this dimension as well. I could dimension those separately, or I could use one of these constraints. I'm going to use the equals constraint, and I'm going to say I want that line to be the equal in length to that line, and you can see it's adjusted it slightly. The advantage of doing something like this is that if you want to change things later on, and if you decide actually we're not going to have some lamps made from 60mm square material, we're going to make it from 80mm square material, I can come back and edit this sketch, and I can just change one dimension. So I could make that 80, hit enter, and both sides change because they're tied into each other. Let's just go back to 60. Of course, if I knew or thought I might be using some rectangular shapes, I might want to dimension those separately. So here's our square drawn, and if I just tilt that by holding down the right mouse button and sort of spinning it around, you can see that I've got a flat square drawn on a work plane, which effectively is infinitely thin. What I want to do now is turn that into a 3-dimensional shape. So I'm going to pick the extrude feature, which is over here. So I'm going to left click on the extrude feature, leaving the sketch open, and it's defaulted to 25mm. I just want that to be 12mm. So I'm going to change that to 12 and hit enter. You'll see it adjusts over here, and that's it. That's simply what I want to do. You'll notice that it says new over here. That's because there's no objects in our modeling view at the moment. That will be important in a moment when we add some extra parts, but we'll just click that tick to say we're happy with that. Now at the moment I'm going to model this part the same as if I was making it. So I would start off by cutting my block of 60mm square material. In our project we use plywood, and then I'm going to drill some holes. So I'm going to add some holes separately. I could have drawn a more complicated sketch, and we'll do that in the next tutorial, but for this instance I'm just going to go through and create different features on this part as I would be manufacturing them. If I come over to the right hand side, left click over here, and I can select the top option, which is isometric, and we can see my part in isometric perspective or projection. Let's add some features to this then, because our starting part isn't just a block of material, it's got some holes in it as well. So I'm now going to hover over the top surface. You can see the outside lines are highlighted, which means I'm highlighting the face. I'm going to right click on that face and then left click on new sketch. I'm then going to press the N key for normal to and view on top of there, and this instance I'm just going to create a hole in the middle. So I'm going to use the center point circle tool, left click on that. I'm going to left click in the center, and then I'm going to draw my circle out. Now what I'm going to make sure I don't do is I'm not going to pick up the edge, because that would constrain the edge of the circle to that edge. So I'm just going to draw it. It doesn't matter if I come a bit bigger, because I'm going to dimension it, but I'm making sure that I'm not selecting any part of a sketch that's going to constrain the circle to it. So I'm going to left click to place the circumference of the circle, and now I'm going to use the dimension tool, and I'm going to left click on the circumference, left click in space, and I'm going to type in 10 because I want the diameter of this hole to be 10 millimeters. So I've drawn the sketch for the hole. Now I need to apply the feature. So you'll see we're in sketch 2, and I'm going to again use an extrude feature. I'm going to left click, and automatically it wants to add onto here. It looks like it wants to sort of stick a piece of dowel coming out of the material. I don't want that. I want to actually remove some material. So I'm going to click on remove with the left mouse button. And you can see that it defaults to 25 millimeters, which is enough just to go through. But I can just left click on there, and I can go up to next, and it will just actually just cut through there as well. And then I'll left click to confirm. So now our block of material has a hole in the middle. I'm just holding down the right mouse button to move this around. Okay, there's a couple more holes on here that we need to add in. So again, I'm going to hover over to the top surface, right click, left click on new sketch, press N for normal 2, and this time I'm going to put a hole in the corner. Now we need 4 holes, but I'm just going to draw 1. So I'm going to use the center point circle again. I'm going to left click in that quarter and to place the center, left click again to place the circumference. And now I'm going to dimension this. So I'm going to click on the top edge and the center, click to place the dimension, and that's going to be 10. So I'm just typing in 10. Likewise, we can do the other edge and the center, and we're also going to make that 10. And then finally, I'm going to click on the circumference and place that in space, and that wants to be 2. So it's just going to be a small 2 millimeter diameter circle. In this instance, we want another hole over here, and we want another hole in the bottom 2 corners as well. So I'm actually going to mirror this part using the edges of the other work planes. Note that I don't need to draw in center lines to do that. So I'm going to use the mirror tool, which is this one. I'm going to select the mirror line, which is the edge of this work plane, and then I'm just going to use the scroll wheel on the mouse to zoom in, and I'm going to pick that circle, and you see it puts it over there. I'm now going to cancel the mirror tool by left clicking on it, and then I'm going to select it again, which means I can select a new mirror line, and this time I'm going to pick the 2 circles. So I now have my 4 circles drawn. I can turn off the mirror tool, and again, if I just hold the right mouse button down to make this 3D, I'm going to left click on extrude, I'm going to left click on remove, and I'm going to change the end condition from blind to up to next. If that wasn't going in the right direction, I could change the direction here. You can see the arrows going up. That won't actually do anything, so left click on the arrows to go back the other way, and tick. And there we have our first part created. Now it makes sense to give it a name. So I'm going to right click on part 1 over here and left click on rename, and we'll call that base block. If I click over here on the little arrow by the square or the cube, I can change that to isometric, and there's my first part drawn. In the next tutorial, we'll show how we can perhaps create a part from a single sketch, a more complex sketch, and we'll follow this one up with that next tutorial. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.